of white trees, black boys, and Jena, Louisiana. If you asked me 2 weeks ago if I've ever heard the name of a little town in Louisiana called Jena, I would have drawn a blank. Jena? Never heard of it. It made me think of the ill-fated Palestinian village called Jenin that Israel crushed into oblivion several years ago. I think the incumbent president's daughter has that name, with an additional N. But that's it. When a friend sent me several internet articles about recent events there, I was quite frankly flabbergasted. I was astonished to learn that today, in the first decade of the 21st century, in Jena High School, Louisiana, there's still a white tree, called that not because the leaves are white, but because it is a generous giver of shade, and only white students sit under it. In September 2006, a young student named Kenneth Purvis asked the school principal for permission to sit under the white tree. The principal answered that he could sit where he wished. So he did. The next day, the white tree was festooned with 3 nooses in school colors. In the South, or the North for that matter, nooses have one clear meaning. They are threats of death. People naturally get riled up, angry, or scared. Jena's high school principal looked into the matter, found the 3 white students responsible, and recommended that they be expelled. The school superintendent felt otherwise, rescinded the expulsion, and instead recommended a 3-day suspension. Speaking to the Chicago Tribune, the superintendent said, "Adolescents play pranks. I don't think it was a threat against anybody." Perhaps he meant anybody important or white. For Jena's black community, this was but the latest slap in the face. Black students at the high school decided to resist by holding a sit-in under the white tree to protest the light suspensions given to the 3 white noose hangers. When word got out about the pending sit-in, the local DA came to a Jena school assembly with several cops to threaten the students who dared to think they could do what people did some 40 years ago throughout the South, before the so-called New South. He told them if they didn't stop making a fuss about this prank, he could be your, quote, worst enemy. To make the point plain, he told the teen gathering, "I can take away your lives with a stroke of a pen." Several days later, a white Jena student who reportedly made racist taunts, including calling black students niggers, got knocked down, punched, and kicked. The boy was taken to the hospital, treated, and released. That very night, he was well enough to attend a public event. Within days, 6 black Jena students were arrested and charged with attempted second-degree murder. All 6 were also immediately expelled. The 6 teens were given bail set from $70,000 to $138,000. Bail at these ranges could have just as easily been set at $1 million, for they were at rates that none of the local parents could afford. That meant, of course, that all of the accused were held in jail for months awaiting trial. And if money for bail was out of reach, what about money for attorneys? Again, out of the question. That meant that public defenders were appointed by the court. For one of the accused, Mikhail Bell, this meant little better than no counsel at all. For his trial was decided by an all-white jury who promptly convicted him of aggravated second-degree assault, battery, and conspiracy. Bell now awaits sentencing, which may put the teenager in prison for the next 22 years. The public defender never challenged the all-white jury pool. He put on no evidence and didn't call a single defense witness. The law of aggravated assault requires the use of a deadly weapon. What was the weapon? Tennis shoes. Families and friends of the Jena 6 are organizing against this case and are also being threatened by the local establishment. One woman told Louisiana ACLU member Tori Pegram, "We have to convince more people to come rally with us. What's the worst that could happen? They fire us from our jobs? We have the worst jobs in the town anyway. They burn a cross on our lawn or burn down my house? All of that has happened to us before. We have to keep speaking out to make sure it doesn't happen to us again, or our children will never be safe." To contact the Jena 6 Defense Committee, write Post Office Box 2798, Jena, Louisiana, 71342, or on the web, Jena, that's Jena, 6defense @gmail.com. From Death Row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal. These commentaries are produced by Noelle Hanrahan. before and beyond Jena. Until several weeks ago, the name Jena was doubtless unfamiliar to millions of people in the U.S. until the demonstrations around the case of the Jena 6 brought attention to that small Louisiana town. But before the case occurred, the name became known to hundreds, if not thousands, of young black men who came to know quite intimately that Jena was just another word for racism, violence, and humiliation. After the ravages of Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans and its surrounding areas, hundreds of imprisoned people were transported to Jena's correctional facility in Jena, Louisiana, a place that became their nightmare. According to published reports put out by the groups Human Rights Watch and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, people arriving at Jena's correctional facility were beaten, brutalized, harassed, and subjected to racist taunts by staff members there. They were denied things allegedly required by the Constitution, like grievance forms, calls to family, or pen and paper. They were treated like they were Al-Qaeda, and this was Guantanamo, this in the country, and in many cases, the state of their birth. The Human Rights Watch and NAACP-LDF have tried to interest state officials in a meaningful investigation, but this has led to little more than lip service. Although federal officials have reportedly announced their intention to investigate, it is equally doubtful that any real, serious investigation will emerge. As for the media, except for some segments of the black press, Jena was little more than a one-day or at best a three-day story. Their coverage, such as it was little more than a platform to allow local Jenites to exclaim how they weren't racists and that nooses were just pranks used by young'uns to have a little fun. As ever, there has been little attempt to look backwards into recent history, and now that the last Jena 6 accused is out on bail, little looking to the future as well. How is it possible in the U.S. today for people wearing KKK robes to always intone, "I'm not a racist"? When viewing or listening to locals there, it is almost impossible to not hear the echoes of 50 years ago, when civil rights actions began to steer the South, that the problem was, once again, outside agitators, like the Reverends Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. They were the problems, not our darkies. Only with the not-too-subtle death threats from Klan-related groups have we seen that the nooses from the so-called white tree, which sparked much of the Jena phenomenon, was far more than boys being boys. The Jena case didn't start with 6 young schoolboys. It won't end with them. The case stems from something deep and abiding in the American heart and soul, and it lives in every state of the Union, not just in Louisiana. This shouldn't be the end of the movement, but the spark for more. From Death Row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal. These commentaries are produced by Noelle.